Hello, here's the Orleans or Orleans battle axe from Windlass. It's pretty tough, fairly sturdy, and it's certainly an axe. Let's see what else we can find out about it. Here goes. There's not much to say about this based on information from the manufacturer, from Windlass themselves. The same text, short piece of text, can be found on all of the retailers' websites. It mentions a full width or extra wide tang, which is nice to know. You won't know how far down it goes, of course, without taking it apart. I don't think there's any reason to believe it's very authentic. They don't even make claims about it being based on something that's from the 14th century. 15th century, sorry, and there's no reason to associate it with the location, with Orleans. I think the French pronounce it with a lot more phlegm in the throat. I'm not going to attempt that, and I think when people say Orleans trying to sound French, it's a bit pretentious, so I'm not going to do that in particular. Anyway, I've looked at some pictures. I'm no historian, but I've looked at some pictures online that look somewhat authentic, that are supposed to be of the battle, the siege of Orleans. And this first one here, we see that there's an axe, although it's not this kind of axe. It's more like a long wooden shaft with a large head on it. More authentic, I think. I don't know that this piece of artwork is from the period or after the period, probably a bit after the period. This next one, we don't see any axes that are this small. We see plenty of spears and we see halberds. And I tend to think that if you're going to use an axe in battle, it's not going to make a very suitable sidearm because it's cumbersome. So if you're well equipped and you have the right sort of position in society to be well equipped, you're not just a peasant with a spear, then you'd have a sword as a sidearm. And if you're going to use an axe, you'd want a much longer shaft than this. You'd want probably not a poleaxe if you're not going to be heavily armoured, but you'd want a halberd or you'd want a spear. I don't think we would have found many people using things like this, but this is speculation. Now we have this final piece of artwork. This is, of course, Joan of Arc, and I tried to find out a little bit more about the artwork. I searched for some paintings. There are some period paintings that appear to be in the same style as this, and you can see there is an axe that, while not being at all identical to this, doesn't look all that different to this. So maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there were lots of people running around with these in France in the early 15th century. I don't know, but there's no particular reason to believe this is based on something authentic from history. And once again, I really do feel it's important to say that if you're going to walk around with this, you'd want something longer. You'd want the range, not this short range that would keep you in range of people who are just using swords. And if somebody's got a spear and you've got this, you're going to be in a bit of trouble. There's a chance of hooking or something like that, but you wouldn't choose it. You'd do better with a spear and a shield, or even a sword and a shield, I think. You see, one-handed, it's going to be a bit cumbersome. So if you're your hand's any further up the shaft, then you're going to lose a lot of the impact. And that's difficult to wield, especially if you were to swing hard. You're going to lose control of it. If I was to swing that really hard and hit a target, then it's not so hard to recover. But if you swing that hard and recover, you're not just going to pull back, you're going to put yourself at a terrible disadvantage, and it really would be something to avoid. So I believe, with my limited knowledge, I learn a bit about medieval weapons. It's interesting, keep catching my hand on that. But I'm certainly not an expert. I don't think this would often be a weapon of choice. Perhaps they would coordinate things so you use this particularly against armoured people. It's got a nice spike there, a nice spike there, but again, you'd really want it longer. Let's have a look at this item in particular. They say that it has an extra wide tang. No reason to believe otherwise. I might have a look at that at some point. These langes, they're quite annoying. I used this in a video a long time ago where I sliced up my sometime target of blades and weaponry red monkey, and in doing so I cut my fingers on it. I've been handling it for a little while now. It's not too bad here, but these are pretty sharp, and in the heat of combat it would be a problem. Of course, I don't think you're likely to enter combat on a medieval battlefield if you're prepared without thick leather gloves at the very least. So it probably doesn't matter, but be aware of it. And I can't see the advantage of them being this long. The tang, we don't know how deep it is. It wouldn't be able to take all the force necessarily of a high impact on its own. But I think you'd be better off having them this length and with extra screws in them, or nails in this case, rather than having them this long. And this one at the back's very loose. Of course, a couple of blows from a hammer will take care of that, but that's how it came. I'm surprised they don't have something longer at the end of the handle, something wider, sorry, that would stop your hand slipping off of it. That does seem like a possibility, and I can't see any reason not to have that wider. They say it's hardwood, nothing else about it. It seems pretty tough. I have had experience with pieces of wood, more with a mind to martial arts, and hitting things like punch bags with them and tyres and finding them break. This doesn't strike me. It would be embarrassing if that broke right now, wouldn't it? This is a very, very tough bag, for its size anyway. It's got lots of fabric compacted in there, so we can say this is pretty tough. Not much to complain about there. Langet's longer than you want. Don't know why there isn't something to stop your hand slipping off the end here. It's nice. It feels dangerous. Don't like the lack of range. If you were to, let's look at fantasy scenarios, if you were to face some orcs or an ogre on the battlefield, this feels like it's going to, a couple of strikes, remove their legs, and it's what you'd want, perhaps mimicking Gimli at Helm's Deep. If you want to use it one-handed, you really do have to move your hand further up the shaft and then on the langets. So you're going to be deprived of a shield if you want to use this effectively. It feels, as I say, it feels very nice. Zombie apocalypse, pick this up. In preference to a sword, I think there's no doubt about that. Let's just have a look at a couple of statistics. I will fill in one of my sword analysis cards, but of course half of the categories are redundant in this case, but I'll do what can be done. Let's have a look. Well, you can see I'm weighing it, you have to take my word for the weight. And it's 1375, 1 kilo, 375 grams. 375. I'm a bit limited in what I can do today because it's very wet, and I don't mind if I get wet. I would much rather keep the camera dry. Not much else really to do except for diameter of the steel. It looks, I'm sure it's one piece of steel shaped. These become thinner at the end. Now you might notice the head spike. Now, I'm holding this pretty straight. The head spike isn't quite straight, it leans that side a bit. I haven't hit anything with it, so that's how it's come. Here we have 4.9 millimeters, and it's the same at the end until it actually is made into an edge. So we have 4.9 for the axe. I'm not going to worry about the distal taper of the spike, it does have one. It starts at, actually it quickly goes to 4.5. Maybe that's just about worth noting for somebody. And then the rear spike I expect will be the same, 4.5, 4.6, and it's only right at the end it tapers. I'll probably put the same for both of them. We've got the weight. I'll add the length later because I didn't bring out a tape measure or a ruler. I'm glad I bought it. It was less than £100. There's a little bit of rust on it already, and especially after having it in this rain, I'll have to dry it well, use a bit of wire wool on it, you can just about see a bit of rust around here. It is painted. I've seen lots of reviews, some on retailers' websites, and I think there's some, I don't think it was on Windlass's website, they don't sell, so they probably don't have reviews. I think it was Cult of Athena, and there was about 9 or 10 people saying brilliant, beautiful, love it for various reasons. There's nothing wrong with it. I'm not in strict disagreement with them, but I don't think it's very authentic. I don't have any other axes except for a pole axe, which is also been by Windlass, and it's okay, but it's not very authentic either. It's a little bit thin, a little bit flimsy. I have a review on that. It's very old, one of my first reviews. I hope I make better videos now, but you might want to have a look at it, who knows. I am going to buy an axe soon, and I need to get more things that aren't by Windlass. Certainly not all of the swords I have are by Windlass, but pole axes. This is by Windlass. I've got a Windlass Warhammer, and I need to try to branch out and get things made by other people. Unfortunately, pole axes, very, very difficult. I found a guy, I mentioned this in my other video, up north who makes them, and he, on his website, said they start about 500. I emailed him, and he said, no, they start at 800 now. I could pay that. I don't want to pretend I've got loads of money to spare, but I could pay that and say, I'm a musician, you pay £1,000 for a decent instrument. I can't justify that on something that I'm not really going to use. No, I can't, so I'm not going to buy one. I'm looking often elsewhere for similar things. Anyway, I want to try to get a more authentic Scandinavian, perhaps, design of axe. You'd expect a longer shaft on it, some curvature perhaps, and I've nearly forgot to mention, if you're going to move around in the fury of combat, this is going to be trouble for you. So you'd really want something that I think would be more authentic, and this would be gone right here, and it would make it a lot safer to use, even if you've still got the spike on the back. It's just, there's too much danger. Of course you get fantasy designs and perhaps supposed medieval designs that are far more impractical than this. Right, I will do a little bit of cutting with it. I might try a couple of bottles. The rain's easing off. I don't care about getting wet really, but the camera would get wet down there. I'm going to try something else. I mentioned in a recent sword review video that I've tried a different cutting material. I'm not aware of anyone else trying it. Have a quick look at that here. In a recent sword review video, I mentioned I'm going to try using a different material for cutting with swords, and it's not something I'm aware of anyone else having used so far. And here it is. It's what we call blue tack, meant for hanging posters or various other things. When I first tried it, this was a fair bit longer. I previously used this for hand conditioning. There's a video about that. And to begin with, it just knocked it straight off. Second time it went through, quite a nice clean cut. And it wasn't that easy to cut. It's pretty tough. And I think, therefore, it's a good material for the job. Heavy enough piece of that will certainly make an effective weapon. As you can see, it got quite dirty in the process, and I lost half of it. But you can wash this stuff. And now I'm going to use some of it for testing, cutting the axe, and let's go quickly through the rest of this part. That's 12 pieces. Let's just weigh it. .549 grams, over half a kilo. That's tough. I made a video before where I used some of this on bungees to punch and said it would be good for hand conditioning, and I was right. This stuff is tough. It has the unusual property of either viscoelasticity or elastoviscosity. I can't remember which, but either way, it's pretty tough like this, and I think with an axe or a sword it's going to be harder to cut through than a lot of people would expect just by looking at it. Find out in a little while. Right then, I'm going to have to find something very sturdy to put this on before I try to cut through it with this and a sword. Here goes. The rain hasn't really stopped, so I'm in a shed so I can keep in the dry and keep the camera dry, and I just want to have a go at cutting through this. I don't think it's going to be as easy as you might think. I don't think it's going to slice straight through it in one go. Maybe I'll be proven wrong. Protecting the eyes. Because I'm inside, it won't be as hard as possible, but it will be pretty hard. And I missed. Let's have... I took just a little off the edge, but only one layer. You know, now I'm doing this, it might just go straight through it. Let's find out. Oh, I'm not saying that was the maximum force you could possibly create. Let's just straighten up for a minute. Okay. On one side it's gone through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. On the other side it's gone through 3 of them. I'll try another one. I am sure that would have taken somebody's fingers off. I'm certain of it. This isn't sharpened to a fine edge. It's sharp. You can slide your fingers along it. I would not, if you were to do that to your fingers, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. I'm sure I hit that hard enough that it would take fingers off and do a lot of damage to other parts of the body. Right, let's see. Let's have another go. I'm going to try to do it as hard as possible this time. I'm holding it here and here. Yeah, I'm going to keep it there to keep balance. I don't want to swing it with all of its weight in here, even though it's on top of an anvil and a hefty piece of wood. I feel some worry about the head coming off and flying about. Okay, let's see, another go. I'm sliding my hands down a little bit. Okay. That was pretty tough. Pretty hard a swing. And it's gone through most of it. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 on one side and 8 on the other. Again, this is tough stuff. Just for comparison, I'm going to have a try with a sword. Keep forgetting the name of this. I mentioned it in a recent sword review. It's from Windlass. They call it something like historical arming sword, whereas I'm confident it's ahistorical. And cutting through wood with something like this is asking for trouble. You're just going to damage it. But I don't think it's too stupid to try to cut through this, and it will give some kind of comparison to the axe. And it's similarly a heavy item. Let's see. I think this stuff, Blue Tack, is going to make a good test cutting material. Though usually I'd want it something longer, and I will try slicing it with swords. Have to be careful of the shelving because I'm in this shed. I'd usually want to cut it there, but it's going to have to be there. I don't feel much like moving the anvil. Ah, interesting, I think. I certainly put force into that, but it wasn't all of my might, and that I felt it slice through. The axe went through more on one side, but overall this went through 9, so the sword went through more. If you could feel it slicing through more easily, of course it's sharper. Interesting. Hardly scientific, but with that brief analysis, I would say that this is more likely to chop off a zombie limb or an orc limb or anything else like that. This is more likely to chop it off than this, and of course this is meant for chopping. So I think that is of some interest. I was going to go outside and hill a couple of bits of wood with this, but it's not really meant for that. I don't want this to get wet. I will take it outside and see if I can cut up a couple of bottles. Now this is important. You saw the 2 strikes I made with this. Come on now. And one of the nails on the langet has come most of the way out. That's a good 6mm out of the wood. The other one that was a bit loose hasn't moved, but this one has come out about 3mm. And when I made the second strike, I was holding it here off the langets. I wonder why. Is that just reverberation from the strike? Probably not, because it didn't go all the way through either time, so it's not as if I was striking wood with it or something as hard as that. But something made this langet move enough to pull it out by 6mm, and I think that tells me that this wouldn't be robust enough for the battlefield. It'd be much better with a traditional axe type where you have a metal head with a shaft going through it. I think that's interesting. I think it's revealing, and they say in particular on the text on the Windlass site, and when you go to retailer sites, they say this is made for use or something very similar. You can check yourself. I'm not saying it's just like a stainless steel wall hanging, but it's not that tough. I'm a little bit surprised. I didn't think that would happen. I tell you what, something told me that I didn't want to raise it as high as possible and strike it with all of my might. Something tells me that about this, and maybe now we found out why. And that makes me think as well, they refer to it as medieval. It's not. It's a modern creation. It's not medieval at all. Is it like a medieval axe? Well, I've already discussed that somewhat. It's an axe. It's medieval axes sometimes had head spikes and back spikes. That might be where the similarities end. I'm not entirely sure. And something I will mention that they say comes with certificate of authenticity. And recently, when I was talking about the Bosworth longsword, I mentioned how they pay attention to making that, and that's more expensive than this. It's 3 times as expensive. I don't know if you'd actually say there's 3 times as much steel. Probably not. It makes me think that Windlass will pay attention to detail and still produce something that isn't that high in quality. I don't remember getting a certificate with that. I do remember seeing a certificate supposedly signed by different swordsmiths during the making process for the Bosworth sword. I don't remember that for this. It could have been there. I don't think this was in much of a box, actually. I think it was wrapped. And one other thing. Oh, damn. Oh, yes. Oh, dear. I caught my climbing strap on the way down. What do you know? I think that was the sword, because this was much closer to the target. Yes, that would have been the sword. That's a shame. I need another one of those. They say certificate of authenticity. Well, authentic what? Authentically made by Windlass? Fine. You can't have a certificate of authenticity saying it's a medieval axe. If you're saying that, then you're lying. I know that Windlass do authentic things, and they've worked with people like Matt Easton, so I'm not saying that they're just I'm not saying that they don't care at all, that nothing they say is true, but there's just a lot of misinformation out there. Similarly, I've seen from, I think it's United Cutlery, they make swords, and I think this is terrible. They make swords saying, this is Gimli's battle axe, Legolas's sword, Aragorn's sword, with a certificate of authenticity. Authentic what? It's not Aragorn's sword, it's not Gimli's battle axe, it's complete rubbish. But that's, I don't know, it's just silly marketing. Anyway, cut a couple of bottles, I think, and then that will be just about it. Here goes. I'll cancel that. It doesn't show you much, but apart from that, the rain's really coming down now. It eased off a bit when I brought the camera down here, but it's really coming down. I don't want to get it soaked. Don't care about me. So that's it then. Bit of information, like I say, about swords. When I had seen a review of this before, it's just somebody cutting up some ballistic gel with it. Of course it's going to do damage to ballistic gel. Of course it is, because it's a 1065 carbon steel axe head. But they don't talk about it other than that. I think I've given you some details, something to look into, and we've also had an investigation of how this works as a cut testing material. And here, axe and sword in the middle. And but it looks a bit more impressive for the sword that way around. I'll be doing a lot with this, and of course one of the things to remember about this is you can put it all back together again and use it as many times as you want. That's it then. Hopefully that will be of use to some people. Thanks for watching. My name's Mark. See you next time. Cheers.